Joe, Harry, thanks for jumping on to discuss an very interesting topic. To be honest with you, with the latest race this morning, that probably was underwhelming to say the least. So if anyone hasn't watched the Miami Grand Prix yet, like I keep saying every week, jump onto KO or Fox. We should get sponsored by KO and Fox because I always tell people to go and watch the KO minis, but
We should
jump
do
on.
Click the link.
Yeah, something like that. Jump on, watch the KO or Fox minis, and then come back and listen to the podcast. But boys, where to begin tonight?
What a shit show.
Should we talk about the build-up?
I don't
Yeah.
want to be. Here's the thing. I don't want to be too critical of the build-up because I
They're
don't
trying
want
to sell the idea.
Yeah, I don't want to smash them for trying to hype up the race. Like I feel like the intention was pure, but the execution was. If the intention was
Cringeworthy.
pure, the execution was very poor.
Mate, as
There
soon
was-
as I
there was
saw
cringes.
As soon as I saw Lando and Daniel walking through freaking Miami with crop tops on, with bloody cubic zirconias or whatever the hell it was on there, I was like, nah, this is going to be... Like, if you're going to do that, I understand the whole marketing behind being in America. They're trying to push it, blah, blah, blah. I can perform on the track.
Mm.
No, he's
Put on a
he's-
good spectacle.
Here's what I
Yeah.
think they missed dearly. If you're going to Miami, right? Miami is in Florida. Florida is pretty much probably considered the racing hub of motorsport in America, other than NASCAR. I would say, like pretty much all the big races are there. You have your Grand Prix of St. Pete. You have your Daytona 1000. Daytona 500. You got the Daytona 24-hour. You got your Sebring 12-hour. You know, these are massive races in the same state. So you're dealing with people who know motorsport in different forms, right? And I'm thinking, okay, we're putting on a spectacle for people in this area, and it seems like we're catering for people flying in from LA, flying in from New York, flying in from like we only saw celebrities. They made it. I don't want to be critical of the tracks. I didn't see it or feel enough of it to really make a judgment on that. But I just thought that they just went way too far with like the Americanization of it. And like you can count like NFL helmets, Pirelli helmets.
I don't have an issue with those kind of things.
I do. I have an issue with that. I think like you're trying to sell Miami. Miami's more than the Dolphins. Like be a bit more creative than that. Like you're in Hard Rock Stadium, but the Dolphins aren't even a successful franchise anymore. Like who are you trying to fool?
Mm.
Like even
I just think
where was IndyCar? Why don't you make a partnership with IndyCar? Get IndyCars as on the same weekend.
Listen. Formula One is not going to do that. I understand that there's a whole marketing. I understand the marketing side of why they did it. I just think that the execution was a little bit cringy, and particularly when Formula One is kind of this industry that, like traditionally, and this might actually be a good thing because F1 traditionally doesn't bend for anybody, and it's got some fairly stringent traditions in the way that it operates. The fact that it was at least different in that regard to try to cater to the clientele, don't think I had an issue with. I just think that it was poorly executed, whether it was the imagery, whether it was like Harry was saying, just the novelty of some of the. I even had that Thursday night drivers introduction on stage with the team managers, and they even that like. Yeah, it's an event, but I don't think it particularly looked that appealing. You'd have to ask people from Miami if they actually thought the same as well. But I don't know. I just think that there was really poor execution. And then the fact is that if you're going to have something like that, then the racing better be good. And the track didn't do a whole lot at all. We talk about it every time we get to one of these new kind of temporarily erected circuits that's got 40% of it is a swooping curve where no overtaking can occur. It was just underwhelming. I watched it this morning. I missed the first 20 laps. And from what I watched from lap 20 all the way to lap 57, the only thing that compelled me at all was Lando Norris hitting Pierre Gasly. Apart from that, and maybe a little bit when the safety car came out and Leclerc was behind Verstappen for a little bit, and that was close for a couple of laps. But really, apart from that, there was nothing. There was nothing. You might as well be racing up Monaco. At least Monaco looks engaging because it's so close to the walls, if that makes sense.
And the marina's real.
And
I guess
there's real water.
My issue with this weekend is I get we're going to America and they're trying to increase the engagement over there.
You would think they never went to America before, though.
The race was it seemed like everything else was the priority for every team except for the race. Yeah. And that's what's frustrating because the race was crap, and that could have something to do with the track because it's sectors are similar to is it Saudi Jeddah?
Yeah, it's a very Jeddah track.
And then the back end of sector 2 is kind of like that section in I think it's Abu Dhabi or Singapore. You know that Singapore section that they go under the bridge.
When I was watching it, there was some parts I thought, wow, this is very Formula E-esque. And then I just read this afternoon some of the drivers actually talking about it, feeling very Formula E.
Drivers didn't like it at all.
It could have. There was definitely that back corner where I don't know what corner it was, what the number, but it was like the Gainbridge sponsorship when it funneled into a very narrow straight, and that definitely did have Formula E vibes. But you watch these new circuits, and it doesn't matter because when the sponsorship is the same on the Rolex and the Aramco and stuff like that, all these tracks, whether it's Miami, whether it's Saudi Arabia, whether it's Russia, from the cameras, they all look the same. There's no, they're all constructed in the same way. And I think we're getting to the point where all the bad,
there's no sense of character with these tracks anymore.
No, because even Imola,
a straight, you come onto a straight, you see the DRS detection wings flap up, you follow them down a straight, they go into some form of swoop and then follow it into a hairpin, follow it through some swoopy corners and then another tight corner, then you hit another straight. The formula is rinse and repeat. There's now pretty much two, one straight and one longer but weirder straight on the track. And then followed by corners that you can't pass in. We used to have street circuits where you could pass
because they're all 90-degree corners.
5 or 6 corners a lap. Now you can maybe pass at 2, and it's like they're just saying, "Oh, we'll give you more DRS zones instead of trying to just make a good pass, like a lunge at full send into a corner."
Sorry, H, keep going.
Sorry. We've seen it recently. Where was the first Baku? 2016, 2017? I love that track. I think that track's
Baku's
awesome.
Right. Yeah.
Right, for a straight track.
Baku's got a lot of right hand,
90-degree corners.
There's 3 left-handers, 3 left-handers at the back that are all 90 degrees, and they've got quite a bit of runoff as well, so you can actually take a lunge.
100%.
But now there's no runoff.
And they put it in a car park. What do they expect?
This is the point I was going to make when I was thinking about it today, boys. We've got all these, we spoke last week that Formula One is trying to take its races to the people, to the fans. But we're getting these circuits now that are literally crammed into environments that aren't really conducive to good racing. The tracks aren't good, whether it's in Sochi around the Olympic Park or, the last 2 tracks in Saudi Arabia and Miami now. Yes, they want to race around the stadium because obviously it's easy to get people in there. It's got some kind of iconography, even though, the Dolphins haven't been relevant since Dan Marino's time. But is Formula One kind of ruining its product purely to get to the fans? Because, we look at, there's tracks in America that could very easily hold an F1 event. They might be a little bit less, they might have a little bit less glamour and grandeur.
Laguna Seca?
Laguna Seca potentially could be, it very well could actually, not potentially, it could. Joseph said, Sebring.
Sebring couldn't hold F1, it's a bit too bumpy. But I was thinking about today when I was watching the race.
What about Long Beach?
I was thinking Laguna Seca. Now, Long Beach is another Miami. It's trash. like
Long
Laguna.
Beach, if you put Long Beach next to Miami, though, Long Beach would look like a bloody paradise.
Long Beach is paradise because it's wide and it has lots of You know what? Having said that, it is better than Miami.
It'd be a great place to have overtaking, but
anyway,
with the exception of the last complex.
I'm sick of this narrative now that's getting pushed. Says that F1 needs to be taken to the fans. F1 hasn't needed to be taken anywhere except to all these circuits for the last 50 years, and they've always sold out. So like this whole argument of we're going to take it to the fans, I think is bullshit. Like you look at, you can have 3 races in Miami. You want to put one on the Eastern Seaboard, put one at Watkins Glen. Like that's an amazing track. It's a beautiful track. It's a massive track. It's wide. It's got everything you need.
It's historic for Formula One too.
It's got undulation. It's got tight corners. It's got nice, right hand. Like it's a beautiful track, and it would probably suit these F1 cars really well. I've never watched a bad IndyCar race, GT race, anything at Watkins Glen. It's such a good track. And then you want to,
also because it's like we keep coming back to it. The good tracks these days don't need to have these bloody corners that look like they've been designed by a 3-year-old that's doodling.
No, I think Imola has really woken people up to the fact that you can go to these tracks. Watkins Glen has hosted Grand Prix before, I mean, it's in New York. Yeah, it's upstate New York. It's probably an hour drive from New York City. But I mean, when you look at what like the tracks America has on offer, you've got a great track in Texas, albeit probably not the best in terms of watching on TV. You've got Laguna Seca that's getting resurfaced this year, another historic track. You don't need to keep taking it to these city circuits. You've actually got the tracks there. That's what boggles my mind.
This is going to be the question.
You've got infrastructure.
It genuinely worries me because next year we're going to have this piece of crap again, and then we're going to Vegas for another street circuit.
We've got 10 years of Miami.
This is the question though, boys, right? Because I understand your point of view, and the reality is that a lot of our traditional tracks, they are they're not where the people are. Traditionally, you have to kind of make some kind of pilgrimage to get there. For Formula One, though, by taking the racing to the fans, even if the product isn't good, they are still making their money. It is still an event, right? And people are still going to watch these races.
Yeah, so but how long till the novelty wears off? That's what I'm saying. It's more than just the money. Yeah, like they'll make the money where they take it.
You get that. Yeah, we get that. But the fact is, from their point of view, why would they change it? Because let's say, for example, they sign a deal with Miami for 3 years. Then after 3 years, they've made their money. They might move somewhere else. You know what I mean?
The question I think Formula One really has to start thinking about is they're going to make their money no matter where they go. Like they're a money-making machine. They've got money from TV. They've got money from wherever they race. They're gonna make it. They're getting fans from Drive to Survive. They've signed them for another 2 years, and I understand that's why they're taking this whole American thing so seriously, because they've seen the rise of the popularity of the show, especially in America. But the thing I'm honestly this week, especially like after these sort of consecutive couple street circuit kind of events, has got me thinking, if we're going to have 30 races and we're going to take these tracks to any city that wants it, and we're just going to build some makeshift circuit, have a procession, market the shit out of it, make them wear traditional hats on the podium, have people who don't even really talk about the sport ever doing post-race interviews, get rid of the people who actually, do the who we've become accustomed to talking about the product every week after the race because we want to put some novelty in it. It's going to die very quickly. I've got to say, like, it's like everything about after the race today was cringe. They got some race I'd never heard of before doing the after pre-race post-race interviews, and you could tell he was talking through an earpiece because he was talking so slowly. It was the most cringy thing I've ever heard in my life. And I don't blame him. I blame the people who make these decisions. And then they have some police escort through the streets to get to the podium. Like you said, they had.
They Americanized it. Like that's it's you can debate. I understand what you mean. You can debate whether it's relevant or not.
I'm not saying don't, somewhat Americanize it. but they Americanized it till it was not even American anymore. It's like the most cringy sort of slapstick version that it could be.
We go to COTA every year, and we've never had this discussion before.
Never.
COTA is amazing. They have the novelty stuff off track, but it's not like this.
They have the nice Pirelli, what are they called?
Hats.
Cowboy hats.
Yeah.
Even
like it's nothing crazy, but like I was saying, this is not the first time we've raced in America.
Yeah.
We've been racing there for years.
This just felt like not Formula One.
Yeah, I agree. You know what the other thing was, and I said this to Harry offline, and I don't know if you'll concur, Joe, but I mean, last night, it's really weird. Like, we didn't have any F1 to watch, but I was watching the Nürburgring 24 hours qualifying race and the Silverstone 500, the British GT. And I said to Harry, I said, I kind of got more enjoyment watching those than this new F1 race that's been hyped up for, the last 3 years. And that's a little bit disappointing considering how long we've been waiting for it. But what I wanted to also make mention of as well was, what were the drivers doing this weekend? What was Lewis Hamilton doing with the protest against the jewelry ban, and Seb Vettel doing with the underwear ban?
I was going to get into this.
What the heck are these guys doing? They are not performing on track as it is. And maybe that's their way of, I don't know, creating some kind of relevance. But
Here's
it's
my
left me
problem.
speechless.
Here's
It's
my
left me
problem
speechless.
Which one?
Both of them. Here's my problem with both of them. If you think about it for about 10 seconds, both of them are actually safety precautions. You know what I mean? And it's not like they're literally saying you can't wear jewelry and you have to wear the fireproof underwear. And this has all come into effect since the Roman Grosjean fire thing, right? He was wearing fireproof gloves and his hands still got burnt. His suit is fireproof and he still got burnt. All right. So you're wearing a ring and you're in a fire. It's going to cause more damage, right? It's like, it's the dumbest shit I've ever.
No, I agree.
I cannot believe
it's going to get hot.
I cannot believe that this is even an argument. Like,
no, it's pointless.
In every sport except probably tennis, you can't wear jewelry. And guess what? I've never heard a player, maybe even NFL, you can wear some stuff in NFL, but other than that, like it's like a prerequisite. And then the fireproof underwear thing, I'm like, are we kidding? Are we kidding right now? We're going to walk through this weekend is already a joke enough. And you've got, 11 championships between two drivers. And one of them's wearing 3 watches, 3 chains, 10 rings, put a nipple piercing in there while you're at it, maybe put an eyebrow piercing, just keep going. And the other one's walking around in his race suit and then underwear.
You know what's annoying
me? Sorry, keep going, H. Yeah.
I was just going to say, we've come through the era of Bernie where everything was locked down. They weren't allowed to do anything. Now Formula One is super liberal and lets them do whatever the freaking hell they want. And then they come out and they complain about this crap. Like,
that's the annoying thing about it.
From one side to the other.
Yeah.
But the thing that's most frustrating, I think, is the fact that, Formula One is bigger than any one racer. And that should be the reality of it. But then you've got someone like Hamilton who is purposely going against the rules, these newly imposed rules. And there are grounds for these rules. Like, it's not like they're saying it because of no reason. Like, someone nearly died last year in a fireball, or 2 years ago, sorry. Someone nearly died 2 years ago in a fireball, and the findings of that particular study said, let's get rid of these things. So there's grounds for the rules to come in place. And then rather than clamping down, once they've made the rule, they say, we're going to give you a two race leeway period so that you can acclimatize to the new rules. It's ridiculous. It's the rules for everybody. They've been put in place. I don't care if you're a 7-time world champion or a 4-time world champion or whatever you are. If you're racing in Formula One and you're getting paid millions of dollars to do so, if you're reaping the rewards of this industry, then you better follow the rules of the industry as well. I think
just put the fireproof underwear on. Like, what's the big deal?
No one can see it.
It's not even that as well. Like, if you think about it, well, because I have been thinking about it a lot. You have
men in their undies.
It's not even the fact that it's undies or it's the fact that it's jewelry. It's the fact that you take it. Like, why is it that it's not a personal attack. You know what I mean? Like they're taking it like it's a personal attack. And then they say, will you race if they don't let you wear your jewelry? And Lewis says, I'm not going to race. We've got a reserve driver. He can do the job. And I'm thinking, like, if this is how much, like, this is what you want, this is what we're going to take to the press, to the public, statements like this. Like, are you really in it for, like, Formula One has given you this platform. And now that you've sort of ascended to the top of that platform, it doesn't give you a right then to sort of take advantage of it. You know what I mean?
The question is, would he be doing it if he was in a championship fight? And it's probably no.
He wouldn't be doing it if he'd just come into the sport either. That's the long and short of it.
It's just like Lewis throwing his weight around. That's all it is.
Here's my problem as well. We've seen so many proper professionals come through the sport. Guys like Hakkinen. Then you had Schumacher for all these years. Alonso, you know what I mean? Like these guys, and then even Vettel until he left Ferrari, really, because Ferrari wouldn't stand for this. Like we've seen these, like this real professional attitude, which probably was a little bit too far one way, but then the answer isn't to swing totally to the other side. Like F1 drivers are never gonna sort of have. I don't know if they're trying to be like NBA players or something like that, but motorsport is not like that. Like the only way to go motorsport racing is for big corporations to put in big money, right? Like it's not about your talent with a ball, how hard you can hit a ball, how good you can kick. It's not about your actual talents. It is, but a lot of more of it is about the money behind it for the team. Like any one of those 20 drivers can do your job if they get into the same team, give or take, right? So
you'll take the Canadians.
Yeah, so don't shun the institution now that there's this freedom, because
don't bite the hand that's feeding you.
Like, because I'll tell you this, like if it keeps getting, like if this becomes a pattern, there are going to be companies who are going to drop off because the corporate side of it is not going to be the machine that it once was.
Well, I think we've probably
Sorry for my rant.
That's right. I think we've chewed the fat on that for long enough. What did you guys make
quickly?
Yeah.
It was that bad this weekend. The highlight of my weekend was Martin Brundle's track walk.
So what did you make of the race?
Him trying to interview
basketball player. He thought some college basketball player was Paddy Mahomes, and he's going pat, and then the guy turns around and he realized it wasn't Paddy Mahomes. I was like, oh, that was worse than who was the other chick he walked up to and she didn't want to speak to him last time.
Oh, so good.
Serena. Oh no, it was Megan the Stallion, I think.
Yeah, that's right. It was too.
Look at you.
I know.
I only remember it because I was watching it live. And
do you want to do some honorable mentions to the race though before we shit all over F1 for too long?
I'll tell you, I think there's only one honorable mention for me.
Who?
Verstappen. Just to get the win. That's it.
What about Ocon?
Apart from that, I'll be honest with you, that might have been one of the most boring races I've ever watched.
Dude, it was the most boring race of this year and probably the most boring race of the last 2 years. And that's saying a lot.
It's making me look forward to Barcelona, and that's always a boring race.
True.
But you know what, as well, though? I feel like the cringeness of the weekend beforehand could have jaded us to it as well. Like it was a race that I found myself watching it. And
what was the weekend before? I forgot what cringe happened the weekend before.
No, like
the lead up to
the race.
Oh yeah.
Like all the.
Like, you know what I did love about the race week? I'll tell you.
I wish F1 teams would disengage with their fans every weekend, not just when we go to Miami.
Do you know what I loved? You know what I actually did love about this week?
What?
The helmets.
Yeah, they had some beautiful.
They had some sick helmets.
Really
Bottas
nice helmets.
had a bunch of bangers. Daniel Ricciardo's bloody frangipani helmet was better than his traditional, the one he's been racing with.
That's the Ace Ventura helmet, mate.
Yeah, I didn't like Lando's helmet, to be honest.
Lando's was trash.
Too trash. But
who else did Albon? Schumacher had a good
nice helmet.
Yep, Albon was good. There was a few bangers. I'll say that. But apart from that, not a real big weekend for Formula One.
I was actually reading a lot of comments on Facebook today because I wanted to get a vibe of how fan perception was this weekend as well, other than my own sort of. I feel like Anthony, I'm just so negative about the race this week. I feel so old, but I was reading through too many comments or wasted too much time reading through comments, and the fan reaction is very much similar to what we're talking right now. Even like a lot of American fans are saying, like, I've been a Formula One fan for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and they say this is not like what American Formula One sort of should be. Like they said, like I've been to races in Texas. I've been to the race at Indianapolis many like years ago. And they said this feels like a mockery of even like it seems so far a mockery of like what America really is. And they were saying like a lot of it seems to be playing to the celebrity visitors who sort of have come to the race, and the vibe was Super Bowl F1 race, pretty much. Like that's what it felt like. That was what they were aiming for, but
they got it. They got the fan.
They did, but like the difference is that the Super Bowl is a payoff of like 7 months of absolute torture for two teams, and it's a celebration because for 7 months, 50 people are going ham. Like this was like a week builder. Yeah, I was like, what? This is not the end of the season. We're like fucking 6 races into a 23 race season. Like, what are we doing?
In the Super Bowl, you probably get 500. So mad. You probably get a total of 500 yards of passing, and we got no passing this weekend.
Oh, that's a nice little soundbite.
Yeah, that one. Yeah. Anyway,
I'm really disappointed.
Well, do we talk about something perhaps a little bit more optimistic?
Okay, hit us up.
Go ahead.
Well, what about the future of Walkinshaw Andretti United?
I feel optimism is a what's the word I'm looking for? Is an opinion depending on how you look at the team. Really, I mean, I'm just thinking
about it from the perspective of the team trying to get factory support for the last. Ever since they lost the HRT name.
No, you're not. So, you're thinking they're coming to the Blue Oval and you love it.
No. I'll tell you.
I don't, because I'm a tick for the guy, so they're not going to. If they're giving me more competition, it's not helping me personally.
This is for me. This is as a Walkinshaw fan who has been a Holden fan for 24 years and has been invested in being a Holden fan for probably 18 years. This one hurt quite a bit, not because I didn't expect it to come and not because I can't see the merits of it, but the more I think about it, for me, it's cemented like the end of an era in V8 supercars.
But I'll say this to Joe, you also took it very well because I feel like the writing was on the wall in some regard.
It is on the wall, and I know that they've been looking for another partnership, and sort of supercars as we know it is definitely changing. And I think even the sport, like the way people look at sports as we know it is changing. But as I've said this many times, I do believe if you were to count the amount of fans that Walkinshaw gained as a Holden racing team, they would be the biggest supported fan base in the country because there's only 2 teams to barrack for many years, and most of them barracked for Holden. And Walkinshaw was the face of Holden.
Does the fact that Holden ends this year as we know it make it an easier transition for Walkinshaw? Because even though Chevy is GM and they're kind of trying to sell it that it's still the Blue Oval against GM rivalry, it's definitely a different rivalry. I wouldn't say dead. It's just different. It's going to be different. So I feel like it makes it easier. The fact that Holden leaves this year for them to make that transition across.
One thing sorry.
Yeah,
go ahead. You go ahead quickly.
I was just going to say, like, I think it is dead, mate, because I'm same as Joey, my whole life, my dad had Holdens, blah, 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 Holden fan. I don't have that same attachment to Chevy or GM. It was Holden. So, even though Kamara is Chevy, I don't care.
One thing I believe that Supercars has done very well, and I don't know if this is Supercars themselves or the teams, but team engagement has gotten so much better recently that I feel like the fans of the sport have sort of transitioned from Holden versus Fords and become a lot more invested in like teams like Erebus, teams like Team 18. So now Supercars has a fan base that follows teams or drivers like Chaz. And because of that,
but it's also
the transition has been, I think, easier for a lot of people. I would love to see how many fans are going to leave supporting the team though, because this is honestly massive. Like I was talking to my dad about it this week, and I said, and he like people like his family who follow the team, they're gone. Like there's no chance at all that they're fans of the team, but they're the people who don't really watch, I suppose.
But Joe, but Walkinshaw Andretti United, like it hasn't been HRT for the better part of 5 years now.
Yeah, but it still has.
It has, but it really hasn't, and they haven't been really performing at that level at all.
Yeah, but, you figure they weren't performing for 5 years before, and they still had the biggest fan base.
Yeah, I get that, but then I feel like the fact that HRT has been Red Bull for the last 5 years, and then Walkinshaw having to. Since they've been Holden Racing team since they left, what's it called, right?
They have.
Since they left. Yeah, they have, but they haven't. But the fact that there was that disassociation from Holden to HRT, and then it going from Walkinshaw Racing to Walkinshaw Andretti, and now we call it WAU. Like it's been a slow progression away from that heritage and tradition. And I think the point that you make about the sport becoming more of a team sport as opposed to a tribal Ford versus Holden sport has been the case, really for the last, if you think about it, when HRT went, we also lost Ford Performance Racing. It became Tickford, became ProDrive before it came Tickford. And we're getting to the point now where you've got this whole group of younger fans who traditionally don't follow teams. They follow, whether it's LeBron James or whether they follow players or drivers. So I don't necessarily think it's going to be the end of the sport, but it definitely will be. It's going to be a new sport. It's going to be a different sport. And I think what supercars have to do now is just make sure that when these Gen 3 cars do come out, that the racing's really good.
Realistically,
yeah,
I think we have an attachment to the Holden versus Ford thing. We've grown up with it, but I think moving forward, I think if they are, putting a lot of stock behind the teams, you look at Formula One. I love McLaren. Ant, you're a McLaren. Joey, you're Williams. We actually have that attachment to the teams, and I think that can only increase the fan base of the sport.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And
it is more sustainable for people to follow teams than it is for them to follow brands, because brands come and go, but teams have a sort of like a longer and you can build more of a relationship when you see the face of the team as just like a person, not like a person who seems attainable and down to earth, whereas like the corporates seem very far away. I think as well though, like now speaking as a fan of the team, not talking about sort of the history of the team, like there are very clear things I see as positives for this move. Like you have probably the second best, give or take, weekends at bad tracks. You have very much a team on the rise that has made a statement of intent saying, we want to be in different machinery to the best team in the group, because the only way we can beat them is if we are in a factory drive. Like this is massive for more than just Walkinshaw. This is massive for Ford Racing, because they've got more cars on the grid that are all factory back. So you've got 4 factory back teams now. You've got Grove, Tickford, Johnson Racing, and Walkinshaw. There are 3 massive teams in the sport, all in Ford Racing. That's number 1. Number 2, Walkinshaw are making a statement saying we want to be able to compete head-to-head with Triple Eight, and we can only do that with factory machinery that they don't have, which is a big statement. Also makes sense with getting that backing with Andretti involved because of his history with Ford, which is more substantial than Walkinshaw's history of Ford, I suppose. But like for the sport, I feel like having.
So before you move on from that, because you just made the point about how when you do look at the Ford teams now, like Grove's still up and coming, but there's 3 teams
Grove,
there.
I think, will continue their relationship with Walkinshaw even closer now.
I agree, but also like Grove are doing a really good job this year. They've come out of relative obscurity to really be putting on a good show. But you've got 3 amazing teams there, and there was an article this week talking where the head of Ford was saying that they've been looking to get quality in to the stable as opposed to quantity. So they still have less Fords on the grid. But if you look at the teams that are in the Fords now and the teams that are in the Holdens, with the exception of Red Bull Racing, you would have to say that the Ford teams do carry the stronger teams, with the exception of the best.
You mean more stronger teams?
Yeah. Well, think about who's going to be in the Holden now. You're gonna have
I thought Erebus
Snapstone
will become
Racing.
the
Oh, you got
second best.
Erebus. I guess you've got Erebus, and you'll have Brad Jones Racing. But realistically, the teams on the three teams on the Ford side would supersede those in the pecking order, which is going to be an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
Does this move slow down Walkinshaw's ascension to the top?
No.
I
I feel like next year is such a reset for everything.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that there's so much less engineering involved and there's so much more spec-ness about the sport, I think that realistically what you're going to see next year are the top drivers all having more chances to win races and to be up there. And I think you'll see the likes of Chaz Mostert up there, Waters up there, SVG will be up there for sure. But I think what we will see now is kind of what we've been asking for in Formula One as well, giving all the best drivers a chance to compete. And I think it's going to be now on a level that we haven't seen in supercars for a long time.
What's wild to think about is that those three big teams actually, the three.
We didn't take Anton from DJR2.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is like you have Ludo. You have Ludo at Dick Johnson Racing. You have McPherson in Walkinshaw. You have Couchy at Grove, all from the Triple Eight stable. Now all running pretty much like sort of
Ford teams
at the top of Ford racing teams. Like that's got to be massive for like the way that they can influence these, new Ford racing. And the other thing that is massive is it's awesome to have Ford backing, like real Ford backing back in the category, because that makes the category stronger. Strong teams, good backing, coming straight from Detroit. And this is coming from a Holden fan. Like for actually the strength of the sport, it's massive. Because this is a bigger statement of intent than General Motors have made for sure.
100%. It's going to be it's a big wake up. Not wake up. It's a big shift in the sport. It's definitely going to ruffle a few feathers. But like I said before, what is going to determine whether people come into the sport or leave the sport is going to be the racing that they put on track. So I think having strong Ford teams and strong Holden teams will be the most important thing. And if the racing is as good as they expect it to be, with the reduced downforce and aero that's with these new cars, and hopefully the spec nature of this series now allowing more teams and drivers to be in the mix. Because I think another thing that we did realize last week in Perth was that even though there is some diversity, it's still very much orientated towards Triple Eight and the engineering powerhouse that they are. So hopefully this kind of provides a little bit of spice to the category, and that's what gets people to stay in there.
Spice or Tabasco?
I can call it Tabasco, whatever you want.
I think it's more of a Tabasco than spice, really.
Yeah, a bit of pop.
I mean, I'm just happy that now I can admit out in public, not just have it in the deep recesses of my mind, that the Mustang is I feel a nicer supercar, like in terms of the look of it, but I could never admit it before.
I still won't.
I know. Here's an interesting question. You jumped on the WAU train. Are you off that train at the end of this year?
No, I've been thinking about it a fair bit. And I don't think so, because as I said, I don't have that attachment. To GM.
Yeah, fair enough.
I've been thinking about it, and I think I really like Chaz. And Walkinshaw and Andretti are two of the biggest names. So I think I'll continue along.
Just to go back to that point you made about the whole shift to team support as opposed to factional support.
Yeah.
As like a Ford, and this would be similar for a lot of fans. Like, I'm a Ford fan, but I hate it when Dick Johnson wins.
Yeah.
And
I know what you're saying.
And Tom, my brother, is a Ford fan, and he hates it when Tickford wins.
Yeah.
And we
I'm
hate
a
it when
Walkinshaw fan, and I hate when Triple Eight wins.
And I hate when Triple Eight wins, and I hate when Triple Eight win. But I don't mind when Walkinshaw win because they've had a tough time. So I feel like for a lot of the fans that are invested in the current nature of the sport, that shift has already occurred, where there's a lot more kind of team-based fandom, as opposed to that factional shift that we had 15 to 20 years ago. So it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes up. But I think it's a good thing for the sport. It's a great thing for WAU. The reality now is, I think whether you're with GM or with Ford, anyone that's going to be in this category now is going to have a better chance at achieving more, provided that they're able to kind of get on top of the engineering and to have a half decent setup. Like it should hopefully provide a bit more diversity in what we see from the series. So it's awesome. I'm really happy to see it, to be honest.
Here's what sort of come through my mind as well this week. For teams like Erebus, teams like Premier Racing, teams that are going to be running Chevys, fans from Walkinshaw who aren't making the jump because they can't do it, and I can understand that, will be looking for a new team to barrack for. And I feel like teams who are running that GM banner, because I know a lot of fans won't jump to Triple Eight because Triple Eight was a Ford team who then became Holden. So there's still a lot of, I don't know if you'd call it bad blood.
Animosity, maybe.
Like they're like the biggest team that has a big following, but it's not like it's crazy how it's not the biggest. I feel like these GM teams who can sort of put their ducks in a row and really put out a good showing, release some nice cars, and sort of have some good results will benefit and gain fans from that. So it's like a really good opportunity for a smaller team to get a biggest market share of the fandom that's definitely going to be out there looking for something new.
You know what I found interesting during the week?
Yeah.
I remembered back to when Lowndesy, I don't know if the team moved to Ford. I can't remember.
He moved
to Ford, and the uproar from the Holden fans. And I don't know, I didn't hear much about this one, so that kind of sold it for me, I guess. That the Holden Ford thing has.
You got to think also Triple Eight Triple Eight were an established Ford team that wasn't getting Ford backing, and they moved to Holden, and it was a huge deal. And then very quickly,
it was a massive deal.
But then very quickly, the sport moves on, and the same thing will happen. By the time we have the roll around for the Clipsal 500 next year, it's it might be a story for the first couple of races till they win a race, but realistically, once pedal gets put to the floor, that's all that matters. How are you performing on Sundays?
If you think about it as well, getting it out there now is probably the best thing that the team could do, because people have got 7 months, 8 months, 9 months to acclimatize to this change. So when next season rolls around, or when the off season rolls around, there are other things that are happening that are more important, really.
Well, they kind of have to, because with the testing is going to start ramping up for all the teams now to get their first Gen 3 car. So they kind of have to make that decision now. It's not going to be able to keep it secret.
One thing that is also interesting, if you think about it, just to end this, is that what this also says is that there are there are going to be 8 Ford Performance sort of back teams on the grid, but for General Motors or Chevy, it seems like that's not going to be the case, because you would think if they were going to back that many cars, Walkinshaw would have that GM Racing backing.
But I was just thinking about now too, right? So obviously Triple Eight is going to be the flagship GM car, but Triple Eight do provide a lot of support to Team 18, to Matt Stone Racing now as well. So technically, theoretically, with Triple Eight being the face of GM in this category, they will still be getting for support from the de facto factory in Australia, which might
They
not be the
will be,
same.
but then that
Might not be the
sort
same.
of goes against what we're saying about Ford, is that all those teams are going to be
Well, the question is
pushing
how
into.
yeah, the question also has to be how much is factory support going to mean now that we've got such a spec series, if that makes sense. So
Or more
is it
spec
going?
series, yeah.
Yeah, is it gonna mean the same thing? I mean, obviously you might have some backing, you might have some engineering assistance to get on top of issues, but realistically, with the nature of this series now, and losing that whole bespoke element for each team, factory backing might not mean what it used to be, because everything's essentially plug and play. And I guess that we'll have to wait and see what it means for the sport moving forward. But to the final kind of talking point that we need to address tonight was the news that dropped last week in MotoGP, which was out of nowhere. It's taken the whole sport by surprise, by storm as well, because it's definitely shaking up the 2023 grid.
Rider market grid.
Suzuki have pulled the Suzuki have pulled the pin on MotoGP, and we were supposed to have our MotoGP correspondent on tonight. He's pulled out because of throat issues, so we'll have to kick on without him. But
what
Joe,
was that? Heart issues?
I'll tell you what, he's pretty devastated. He's, as the guy that's the bastion of support for MotoGP, they're potentially going to be losing a loyal fan because of this. So Joe, when the news broke, I mean, what was your initial reaction? Bewilderment?
No, it wasn't, because I follow more than one discipline of motorcycle racing, I suppose. When
if there was one team that was gonna, if there was one team that you would trust to do it,
I said,
yeah,
the news broke, and I said it had to be them. And Mike, and I was talking to Mike, and Mike's like, "Can you believe it?" And I said, "You know what? I actually can." I said, if you saw the way that Suzuki were in every other discipline of motorcycle racing, they vanish so quickly.
Like, they put every penny into MotoGP.
And the funny thing, it's not even that. It's like they were at the top of they were at the pinnacle in like motocross, right?
MX.
They had Ricky Carmichael, they had Ryan Dungey, they had Stewart, and then they're gone, right? So they were at the top, and then they're gone. They had
Dungey won on a KTM, but anyway.
Yeah, but before that, he was winning on Suzuki's.
Yeah.
And then they just disappeared. They've done it in superbikes. They've done it in every discipline. They just disappear. And they just float in and they float out. So when it was like Suzuki's going, I was like, if any team was going to leave when they were sort of at the top, it would be them.
But do you think that might just be the way that the factory has, like, that they have to operate from a financial point of view? They might just have enough money to invest in kind of one sport at a time. So, I mean, but
I don't buy that, because if you look at a company like Aprilia, they would be hardly different from, they're even probably more bespoke than Suzuki.
Look at the, if that's the argument you're going to make, then you have to look that they both came into the sport roughly at the same time, and how much more success has Suzuki had compared to Aprilia.
Yeah, but then the difference is when
it's visible, but it's also visible to see how much.
Look at the brand, like as a brand, not talking about as in terms of.
Let me finish my statement.
Okay, finish your statement, then they'll clap back.
I was going to say it's visible to see just how much finances they've pulled out. Like, you can visibly see the superbike has not changed in the last 10 years.
That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying
motocross bikes haven't changed in the last 10 years.
Suzuki have come into the sport and have invested in the actual sport, but riding the wave of that sport, winning a championship in that sport, their road bike is 11 years old. Like, if you think about it, if you were developing a road bike 6 years ago and you won the championship and you launched a new flaming bike after you won the championship.
Flaming.
Do you know how big the fan base of Suzuki is? That's the thing I don't understand. Suzuki have got this fan base of old people, like older people from like the Schwantz era and stuff like that, who love that team. And then in dirt bikes, it's the same. But
Joe,
maybe have failed to capitalize.
I understand that, but maybe they've got to the point where they have re-established their name in racing through MotoGP, and now part of their strategy is, okay, we've re-established our credentials again in MotoGP. We need to kind of work on our road bikes, and maybe they're saying that money that we'll put in MotoGP now we'll put into a road bike, we'll put into a super bike.
Race.
Yeah, I understand that, but then maybe they move to super bikes so that they can capitalize and develop a bike for people to actually purchase. Because as good as the GSX RR is, it's a prototype. So you'd hope to assume that now that they have re-established themselves in the world of MotoGP, they can say, okay, let's develop a new bike and let's kind of get people purchasing it again, because they haven't had anything for 10 years.
What does this do to MotoGP moving forward? Like, what impact?
I don't think it does nothing really.
It does nothing. The fact that
I think Suzuki is the least. You would consider Suzuki the least invested of the manufacturers anyway. I mean, they have had no intention of running 4 bikes. Like, even look at someone, Aprilia have had the intention of running more than 2 bikes. And here's the other thing that boggles my mind: you sell your bikes. So if you make more than 2, teams buy them from you. So you make money selling bikes to other teams. You also make money making new road bikes, and you also make money making new dirt bikes. People like buying new stuff. So I think Suzuki's problem is they just don't want to make money. They just keep shipping the same stuff over and over and over and over and over again. And it's infuriating because they're like, oh, we just move slowly. It's like, no, you don't move slowly. So you miss waves, you miss trends. We had COVID, bike sales went up, and you made nothing.
I think this might be a slight oversimplification, but
it is, but it's not, because the writing has been on the wall for like 15 years.
But if you're saying it doesn't have an impact, why was it a surprise to you guys? Because I know Michael.
No, it doesn't have an impact.
It was a surprise it was a surprise to me because they're doing so well, and I thought, why would you leave when you're kind of at the peak of your powers? But then, in the same token, my whole thought process was, if they want to capitalize on the, like, everybody knows that Suzuki doesn't have the same resources as, Honda, for example.
Or Yamaha.
They don't have, Yamaha even Yamaha, but they don't have the same resources to split their kind of financials and their engineering into all the different avenues of racing. They kind of have to focus on one at a time. So my thought process was, if that's the case, then maybe they're going to capitalize on this swing in fortune through road bikes, etc. But to answer your question about what it does for MotoGP, yes, it was surprising in the sense that I didn't expect it because they were doing so well, and there's a chance that they could win a championship again this year. But in relation to what happens to MotoGP, not a whole lot. I think the fact that Aprilia have turned a corner this year and they're competitive, that will just fill that point, because realistically, if you think about where Aprilia has been traditionally, when Suzuki have been good, they've been at the back of the grid. They haven't been doing a whole lot. So they'll shift straight back in, and hopefully KTM kind of gets their act together this year as well. The interesting thing that's already come out from MotoGP is that, Aprilia has been performing for 6 races, and there's already talk about them having a satellite team next year with the Leopard Racing team.
Oh, really?
So yeah,
that's massive.
That's come out this week. So there are already conversations about how they're going to fill the grid, and it seems like there'll be a satellite Aprilia team next year as well.
Leopard have a team in both other categories, don't they? Moto3 and Moto2.
Yeah. So it works really well, because you're going to have no teams now that don't have a satellite team, and I don't think it's going to be that different as well. But the interesting thing is that Honda have confirmed that Pol Espargaro will not be riding for them next year.
Yeah.
And it seems like Johan Mir will be racing as Marc Marquez's replacement. So that's going to be fascinating to see what happens there. But yeah, crazy news in the world of MotoGP. Definitely is surprising, but also, like Joe said, understandable considering of all the teams in MotoGP.
Thing is, we've seen it before. Like, it's not uncommon for a team to leave one championship and transition. Like, we've seen Aprilia go from nothing from MotoGP go into World Superbikes, do good in World Superbikes, and take a step up back into MotoGP. We saw Kawasaki struggle in MotoGP, didn't want to invest in it, and they slip into World Superbikes, and then have dominated ever since. We see BMW only in World Superbikes, so it's not like it's new for like smaller manufacturers to sort of dabble in one or the other. You know what I mean? I think the thing that's more surprising that we've had no news of them dabbling in anything. You know, like
something will pick up.
I think
it'll be motocross, because
there's the biggest market for that at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's gonna from a financial point of view, it makes sense, because the sport is on a boom. Sales are up, bike sales are up. I think they'd have to capitalize on that. But then it also wouldn't surprise me to see him bring out a new series of sports bikes as well, just to capitalize on that.
Michael's saying that there's words that they're not going to even make sports bikes anymore, which is interesting. But then why release
just
a Hayabusa this year and like that's
Vitaras?
Yeah, he said they just want to make Suzuki Swifts, and I was like,
that has been part of the conversation for the last 5 years or so, that Suzuki was transitioning in just purely into
cars,
and I never really put much credence into it. But you know, with the whole landscape of cars now and SUVs and the small compact car, I mean, they've obviously got two pretty popular products on the market. So who knows? It's definitely interesting though.
Even as someone who's never really followed bikes, like you grow up knowing Suzuki's known for making bikes. Why would they disregard all of that history just to make a shitty SUV?
There's more money in cars.
Yeah,
but is there? There's a lot of money in a lot of places. You just got to transition to it properly, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're talking about it like we're financial / economic experts, but
I'm Greek, mate. We're great at economics. Like here's the funny thing as well. Like
your country's broke.
Like F1 had the same thing last year with Honda. That's the funny thing. Like Honda wanted to leave on the top, like which is sort of the same thing, but it's not, because they still sort of wanted to be involved, and Honda's involvement in other motorsport is so big, like in racing, car racing, bike racing, every discipline of bike racing, nearly every discipline of cars, and they're massively different sized companies.
If Honda was to leave MotoGP, that would be like,
dude, if Honda, Ducati, or Yamaha was to leave MotoGP, that would be landscape altering, because you would think, what's happening? I mean, the other thing I was thinking is it because there are so many good teams in MotoGP now that the budgets are just getting to a point where where Suzuki's saying we've got to tap out now because we know that it's not sustainable.
Yeah. Well, if you think about how much the bikes have even developed since they joined with the electronics. I mean, they tried to make electronics simpler, but when you look at all this anti-wheelie and launch device, and I mean, MotoGP, and it's probably a conversation for another night, but MotoGP is probably getting to the point now where they're going to have to implement some similar things to F1 with the cost cap, maybe even getting rid of some of the technology that they're using, and kind of simplify, like get rid of maybe the active GPS systems and all that kind of stuff, even the fairings. I mean, obviously it makes for faster bikes, and who doesn't want faster bikes, but is it getting to the point where if you're kind of preventing smaller teams from staying in or joining the series because of the budgets that the sport has?
But now they just buy bikes. They're seeing the small teams just buy good bikes. That's the new thing. It's not like you have to develop a bike. You just I've got $8-9 million to splash on a bike. I've got this much money.
But how much is it? But how much is it costing Suzuki just to develop and stay in the arms race with the likes of Honda and Ducati?
Yeah, I'm not. I understand that, and I think Suzuki's been bought and sold now to a new company. That's also happened as well. But if you think about it, they didn't know this was happening at the start of the year, because that bike cost a lot of money to develop, and it's a new bike. It's not like it's very much
they've spent money on a new squat device and a new launch control.
It's definitely a revolution, not an evolution. So there's been a lot of money invested in it. So I would also be interested to see.
That's one of your favorite phrases,
I love it because it
But I'd say that
it encapsulates what
the
kind of
Suzuki's an
vehicle it
evolution.
is.
The Suzuki's an evolution. It's not a revolution.
Look,
It's
we
got
know
device and fairings. It's a revolution, bro.
we know Japanese manufacturers
New engine.
have a habit of pulling out of motorsport just as they're
They
about
do.
to win. So maybe Suzuki's up for it this year.
Oh, mate, he
Because
knows.
they're practical. That's why.
Yeah, exactly. They're pragmatic.
They haven't got the It's not
Industrious
about the
little
pride.
fellows.
Yeah. Well, boys, this is only halfway through this week's worth of content that's coming out on the pod this week. So if anyone listening will have the Valmont Racing podcast coming out on Thursday night as a bit of a precursor for the Bathurst 12 hour. Hopefully we'll also be going up to the Bathurst 12 hour and throw up. Well, we will be going up and we'll be throwing up some content while we're there. It seems like it's going to be a slightly damp affair.
It's going to be cold.
And wet. So maybe gum boots.
We've never gone this time of year before.
Yeah. So be be aware of what's coming out on the pod. Joe, legends. Thanks for jumping on. Thanks for.
Sorry, guys, for having to listen to probably the most depressing pod that we've done. Just
I wouldn't say not depressing.
Not depressing, but
realistic.
Like,
There's a sense of realism. There's a sense of realism about it, right? Like, everything can't all be.
Not all sugar coated.
No, it can't. Exactly. It's not all barbecue. Sometimes you've got to have a burnt brisket.
Can't all be hashtag blessed,
What was that analogy? It's not all barbecue.
Because barbecue's amazing, but sometimes you get a burnt dry biscuit.
Why don't you say it's not all sunshine and rainbows? Like, no one's ever said that in the history of the world.
I think this guy just always has barbecue. Last week it was meat and potatoes. This week it's not all barbecues. Love it.
Wait, how good is barbecue?
Yeah,
it's good,
delicious.
Right? Sometimes you get a bit of dry burnt brisket, right?
Still good, but
today was a bit of dry burnt brisket.
Don't try and save it. Just quick. Don't try.
You can't save a dry
burnt.
You can't save a dry burnt.
You can't
brisket.
save what you just said.
It doesn't rehydrate.
That's the dumbest thing I've heard this week. Probably this month.
Tonight was a beef jerky, boys.
You know what? I think that's how we're going to sign off every race, every week. Pod now. It's not all barbecue.
All right, boys.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys.
See you later in the week for the Valmont episode.
See you
Cheers,
guys.
boys. Bye-bye.